Hello, my name is Grace Jessee, and this is my audience. So how many of you enjoy reading from an electronic device instead of from paper? Well, this is a big debate in the educational world. As many schools now use devices in the classrooms, some are now concerned about how this might hinder students' progress. Today, I will explain why using paper materials is better for education than electronic devices. Up until the 8th grade, my school used all paper and pencil and then introduced iPads. Many, including myself, did not like this change and continued to do their assignments on paper. As these sort of initiatives become more and more popular, it is important to understand how devices hinder learning. Therefore, I will explain 3 reasons why paper is better than electronic devices for education. First, electronic devices decrease concentration. They also reduce retention, and finally, they interfere with student sleep cycles. First, paper should be used for education because devices hinder student concentration. Many studies have found that digital reading decreases concentration by encouraging multitasking. Researcher Naomi Baran survey studied US, German, and Japan students and found that 92% find it easier to concentrate when looking at paper materials as compared to with digital materials. She also found that 26% of students multitask when using paper materials versus 85% with electronic materials. That is a staggering 58% difference, which shows how paper materials allow for better concentration and thus more learning. Furthermore, a number of studies cited by the New York Times found that young children are particularly vulnerable to distractions. Parents and children concentrate more on devices than books when reading from e-readers together. Instead of talking about plot points and the meanings of new words, children and parents alike are often distracted by device buttons. This is especially important because reading and discussing plot points is crucial for the development of children's language. Combined, these studies show how electronic devices encourage harmful multitasking and distraction. Therefore, it is important that we use paper materials instead of electronic devices to maximize concentration and improve learning and development. Second, we must use paper materials in education because electronic devices reduces students' ability to retain information. Many researchers say that digital materials don't allow the same level of comprehension and memory. For example, a Norwegian study found that those who read short stories on paper were more likely to remember plot points in the correct order than those who read it on e-readers. Moreover, a study cited by EDUCAUSE tested student retention of short articles through multiple choice questions. They found that those who read on paper had more high scores than those who read on electronic devices. As you can see here, those who read on paper had an 11% chance of getting a perfect score, whereas those who read on a tablet only had a 5% chance of that. Similarly, for 9 out of 10s, 17% of the paper group got a 9 out of 10, and only 13% of the tablet group did. This shows that paper is much better for education because it allows students to accurately recall what they have learned. Another study by neuromarketing firm True Impact used eye tracking and brainwave technology to test the effect of paper reading versus digital media. Here, you can see that they found digital media took 21% more cognitive effort to process, meaning that it's harder to understand and then remember. They also found that those who viewed paper ads recalled the brand name of the ad about 75% of the time, as opposed to only 44% of the time with digital media. This research emphasizes the significance of paper materials make on the student comprehension and ability to remember information. It also shows that paper material is better for education because it boosts student retention, which is needed for them to learn successfully. Lastly, it is important that we use paper instead of electronic devices in education because they interfere with students' sleep. It is well documented that students often don't get the amount of sleep that they need and that this interferes with their education. Research also shows that electronic devices contribute to this by increasing visual fatigue and interfering with sleep as well. This is supported by a Harvard medical study, which looked at the effects of reading on an iPad versus reading on paper and how that affected the sleep patterns of subjects. They found that subjects went to bed later and did not get the same amount of sleep, feeling less tired the next day. These iPads also created a significant loss in REM sleep, which means that even if the students did get in full 8 hours of sleep, they still did not feel rested the next day. Another study done by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found similar interferences of electronic devices with student sleep. Here, researchers found that electronic devices lowered the level of melatonin in the body as well as delayed its release, meaning that students had a harder time falling and then staying asleep. In fact, this chart here, you can see that it took those who used ebooks an average of 20 to 30 minutes to fall asleep versus those who used regular books only about 12 to 15 minutes. This is a significant difference, and all in all, this research shows that electronic devices negatively impact sleep patterns, which is obviously detrimental to student learning. Thus, to allow students as much sleep as possible for better education outcomes, it is important that we use paper materials in classrooms instead of electronic devices. In conclusion, although electronic devices in classrooms are becoming more and more popular, it is important that we understand how this might impact student learning. Many disadvantages to electronic devices compared to paper materials include the decrease in student comprehension, the decrease in student concentration, and the interference of electronic devices with student sleep. These disadvantages, backed by science, show why paper materials should be used in classrooms, not electronic devices. Thank you.